Well, it's funny because even if you look at something that I would not consider to be necessarily a straight-out spiritual book, and certainly not a book having to do anything with sexuality, something like Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, there's a section in there that talks about one of the ways to be able to achieve what you want in life is the transmutation of sexual energy, where so many people young in their life allow it to, they think with certain parts of their anatomy and get led around that way. And when they can transmute that energy and bring it inward and upward, so to speak, then success in their life really, really begins, and it becomes a lifetime procreative process as opposed to just a physical thing.
Yeah, and that transmutation is really the trick, because if you're not doing something to transmute or expand that energy up to higher purposes within yourself, it will tend to go out in other directions, like the people have the impression of the orgies and the bizarre practices and all the weird things that go on in all the different kinds of sexual arenas that exist for human beings. To be honest, many of those things are just symptoms of energy that's not really being managed very well. Either that or lifestyles are chosen for other reasons, which is fine. Everybody should choose their own lifestyle. But when things go to excess, and it's particularly going to harm and to the bizarre, those are signs of sexual energy that are not being transmuted and expanded to higher purpose within us.
Well, it keeps the leather industry going.
Yeah, it does, and there's nothing wrong with leather if that's what you're into.
Sure.
If you're using these principles, it works there too. But I think we should get a little bit more specific about what we're talking about here, because no matter what your sexual orientation may happen to be, people engage in arousal, okay? And they, for the most part, tend to reach orgasm, if you will. And that's a process that people go through over and over and over again within whatever lifestyle they happen to be living. What we're talking about in tantric sexual practice is slowing down the process and staying in front of orgasm for longer. Not necessarily denying orgasm. Orgasm is not the enemy here. What we're trying to do is harvest the energy up higher into the nervous system. So we're talking about specific techniques for doing that.
Okay. We need to take a break to get ready for the next hour, which is the good news here tonight, is that we're going to be on until 9 o'clock tonight. I mean, we're glad that Miami's playing basketball. Unfortunately, they got beat tonight. It did cut into our time, so we decided to grab a little bit back. So, Yogani, stay with me after the top of the hour. Take a quick break for news. Our telephone numbers are 513-749-1360 or 877-345-3779. That's 345-3779 with an 877 in front. Give us a call here at 1360thesource.com. 807 at 1360thesource.com. Yogani, thanks for bearing with me.
Hello, I could hear you, but I don't think you could hear me. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Good.
Now that we got through our Verizon commercial.
Sounds like a cell phone commercial, doesn't it?
Exactly right. We got the connection back, which is a good thing. Maybe it was the universe conspiring against us to keep this information quiet, because Tantra has got a history through the years of never being written down and not being a written form of thought and philosophy. It's always been handed down from guru to guru and from teacher to disciple, and so maybe we're breaking the rules here, and that's what happened. I don't know.
Well, it's about time everybody heard about this.
And I'm glad that I can be part of it.
Me too. Me too. Well, one of the things that really should be mentioned before we get into the practices themselves is everybody sort of has their own desires about sex, and that's kind of an understatement, I guess.
Yeah.
And maybe the word intention is a better word. What do we intend with our sex? Obviously, it is a highly all-consuming and pleasurable experience, and you don't need a whole lot of forethought to be thinking about that. It just happens. But what are we doing sex for? Are we doing it because we want to have a child? Obviously, many people do. Are we doing it because we want pleasure? Aha, a lot of hands go up out there for that one, I guess.
Right, pick me, yeah.
And then the next question is, how many people are doing sex because they think it's a spiritual experience? And probably quite a few hands go up with that, too, because it is a spiritual experience. And what we're talking about here is taking that ecstatic spiritual component of sex and expanding upon it and turning it into something much more and far expanded beyond what an orgasm is, if anybody can imagine that. But it is true.
Well, Yogani, I think that for some folks, maybe the intention doesn't come first from a spiritual side, but perhaps in a relationship at some point in time, and they've had they've shared something intimate with somebody, and they realize that they went someplace that isn't on this planet, and maybe it's no coincidence that a lot of times when people are in the throes of that ecstasy, they say, "Oh God," and that even the French call it la petite mort, which is little death, and so they already know that there's something spiritual there. Their body tells them about it. So then maybe the desire can kick in to take that someplace else.
Yes, I think you're right, Scott. We all have had that experience, and we all want to get it back, and we may even obsess about getting it back. But regardless, we find a relationship with something bigger than ourselves in sex, and Tantra and the methods of Tantra are a way of expanding that in a way that is beyond the sexual aspect. Although there is a lot of overlap in terms of when the energy goes up, it still will feel sexual, but then it becomes something much more, and it has a different outcome, which maybe we'll talk about as we get a little further along here.
Okay.
I'd like to just read a short sentence from the dedication page of the Tantra book that I put out last year. It's a quote from a 4,000-year-old scripture called the Vijnana Bhairava, and this is what it says. 4,000 years ago, this was written. At the start of sexual union, keep attention on the fire in the beginning, and so continuing, avoid the embers in the end.
I think it was actually a Chinese quote, wasn't it? Or was it?
Well, I think it's actually a scripture that's now considered to be a Buddhist scripture,
okay,
and a Zen scripture. But it's also the basis of a whole sect of religion called Kashmir Shaivism in India. So this scripture is used by a number of different traditions. But this quote really summarizes in one sentence what tantric practice is, at least with a couple.